I was putting this mic on, and Paula said, "You look funny." And I said, What? I look funny? I don't want to go. She said, "No, like Madonna." I was like, huh? So if I break into a verse of Vogue or something like that, just drag me off as quick as possible. I didn't set out to have the longest sermon title ever. Our God is an awesome God. Lessons from Signs, Wonders, and Miracles. It was first just signs. And then as I was developing it, I started thinking this was a movie from 2002, and I didn't want a whole lot of analogies between that. So I thought it'd be better just to get it out right now. It's not about signs. It came out in 2002. Great movie. Enjoyed it. But what it is have some basis on is this book by a gentleman named Eric Metaxas. It's called Miracles. And I highly recommend it. This is not a book report, but it did influence me for our lessons today. Paula gave me this book in December for Christmas. And I did finish it this year, and that's no small miracle in and of itself for me to finish a book in actually 1 year. But I found it thought-provoking read and a great basis for what we're going to talk about today. One of the things that I do, and I'm sure most do when they're preparing a lesson of any type, is to try to do some kind of literature review. Not just this book, but others, see what others have said about miracles, signs, and wonders. And I downloaded this study on the book of Acts on miracles. And it looked like it was well researched and developed, and so I started reading it. Got about 4 or 5 pages into it, and I wanted to put lighter fluid on it and set it ablaze. The entire purpose of it was to try to minimize what miracles were, their exact purpose in time. They could be for nothing else, or that kind. You know what I'm talking about. I've got this all figured out. Don't doubt me. This is all they're for. And I'm actually glad I found it, because it helped me set the tone for myself when I was developing this lesson. And I want to impart to you, it's a mistake to try to minimize things like that and try to just say I got this all figured out. God is a God of incredible power and wonder. And there's a lot more going on beyond our senses. And let me give you just a short little example here. We're sitting in a small church building right now, about 1,600 square foot. We're located in Springdale, Arkansas, about 110 square miles. And we're located on this spherical body we call Earth. It has a surface area of about 200 million square miles. It's spinning on its axis at 1,000 miles per hour, orbiting a giant mass of burning hydrogen at 66,000 miles per hour, occupying one tiny fraction of the Milky Way galaxy that is blasting through the universe at 1.3 million miles per hour. Our existence is a miracle. We don't have everything and anything all perfectly figured out, and that's one of the awesome things about being a created being. We don't have to have all that figured out. We're a child of God. Yes, there are biblical reasons for miracles. Yes, there are specific types that were used, and they had a specific purpose in healing and provision, and we'll look at some of those today. But they don't fit in a nice, perfect little, neat little box for us to try to explain away, and we'll see that a little later. The Greek word for miracle is semaios. There's another word there that I looked up, semino or something like that, but it means sign. And signs do what? They point us to something, and they point us to something important in the case of miracles, and that is our Heavenly Father, Jesus. So beginning with the end in mind, today's lesson is simply this. It's to remind us about the signs, wonders, and miracles of God, directing our hearts and thoughts to our omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent Creator. And that is simply all it is. Let's look at some definitions. In Merriam-Webster, where we go to first, miracle is said an unusual or wonderful event that is believed to be caused by the power of God. In the Oxford Dictionary, a surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore considered to be the work of a divine agency. And then finally in Bible.org, it gives several definitions, but this is the one they seem to like the best. A miracle is a less common kind of God's activity in which He arouses people's awe and wonder and bears witness to Himself. And then in addition to that, Eric Metaxas adds this in his book, when something outside of time and space enters this time and space. And I really like that too, because that helps me get a grasp sometimes on what we're talking about here. On any day and time, we function within this envelope of time and space that God has created for us. Certain laws do apply to us. When we trip, we fall down. We don't fall up. We do have limitations. Yet this wonderful God of ours doesn't want us to feel limited. He wants us to go to Him, trust in Him, trust that He is above and beyond those limits. He desires us and likewise wants us to desire Him. And throughout history, God has stepped in and defied our limitation and defied science to direct us around those restrictions and lead us to Him and only Him. There's about 50 miracles in the Old Testament, so we'll start there. Everybody get comfortable. It's going to take a while to get through all these. No. We're going to pick one. And I selected this one, Elijah on Mount Carmel. And I say Carmel, some say Carmel. I looked up and it says the exact right definition, the way to pronounce it is Carmel. So I'm going to say Carmel. I picked it because I taught it in Vacation Bible School one year. And when you taught something in Vacation Bible School, you remember it real well. So I'm going to go through that today. I'm going to share the verses. I'm not going to put them up here because I don't want you to get distracted by that, and I don't want to get distracted by clicking through it. Just sit back and listen to this wonderful miracle that occurred in 1 Kings 18 with Elijah on Mount Carmel. And Ahab went to Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" Remember what had happened? There was a time of drought that Elijah had prayed for, and Jezebel was running around killing all the prophets. God had told Elijah to go to King Ahab, and Obadiah had told King Ahab, that he was coming. He said, "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow Him. But if Baal is God, follow him." An interesting point here, it said, but the people said nothing. They were kind of dumbfounded by that choice right there. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the one and only of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God." With that, people changed their silence and said, and all the people said, "What you say is good." Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light fire to it." So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "Baal, answer us," they shouted, but there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar that they had made. At noon Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is God. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water, and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did until they did the 3rd time. The water then ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you are Lord, our God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." And we all know what happens next. He rounded up all the prophets of Baal and Asherah, and they were killed. This miraculous event of fire from heaven was an answer to Elijah's prayer. And can you imagine the scene? That scene right there that some artist depicted is far from probably what it looked like. It had to be absolutely amazing. And sometimes we get caught up in maybe Cecil B. DeMille's view of what it might have been. But can you imagine? This happened. This happened here. This happened on this earth. Fire came down from nowhere, out of heaven, and proved who He was. God sought to turn the hearts of His people back to Himself from that bad cycle that the Israelites had of good, bad, they get things together and fall apart, get things together and fall apart. This is what He was using to return their hearts to Him. He first off used a time of drought to get their attention, then through His prophet performed a dramatic miracle, right before their eyes. No one who witnessed this would have ever doubted that Lord was God, at least at that time. So the lessons that at least I get from this, I think, first of all, he was outnumbered, wasn't he? Elijah was tremendously outnumbered. Do you ever feel like you're outnumbered in your witness? You ever feel like everyone just seems like 3 or 4 to 1 against you every time, whether it's science or philosophy or whatever? It seems just that way. We've got to remember that God's name, Emmanuel, God with us, He's always with us. He's always there to fill in the gap that we tend to fall in. And also remember that Elijah didn't just run out there and point and do it. He prayed. He prayed to the Father, God of Abraham, the God of Isaac. It says in James 5:16, the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. He prayed for drought. Drought came. He prayed for rain. Rain came. He prayed for fire from heaven, and he got it. None of these were possible on their own. God reached into our envelope from His, altered reality, and demonstrated there's just one God, and there's absolutely nothing He cannot do. People's heart returned back to our God and away from evil, but not just evil, really nothing. Nathan made a point a few weeks ago about how if he for 1 second believed that God really didn't exist, how that would change his life dramatically, and I totally agreed with him. But what blows me away even more is people that have somehow supplanted a God that is so evident to me with something like Baal. And nowadays, sometimes it's Mother Earth, if you will. I have a friend that posted on Facebook not too long ago a simulation of a meteorite striking the Earth and just destroying all life on Earth. And his comments were, wouldn't it be wonderful after that happened, after all of Earth was destroyed and humans were removed, how Mother Earth would repair itself and once again be void of humans and be a much better situation. I don't understand that. I don't understand that at all. I don't understand how Baals and the Asherah prophets, what they were praying to and what was the purpose of that. But how many today get caught up in something like that, something or absolutely nothing, when we have such an awesome God that has demonstrated His power in so many different ways and His evidence in so many ways. God, the one and only God, He created us. He's with us each and every day of our lives. He wants a relationship with us. He can step inside our envelope at any time He wants to and alter our circumstances and show who He actually is. So we covered the Old Testament really quick. This is the New Testament. I'd like to read through those. New Testament miracles, there's about 50 of those at least listed. As it says, there's many more than there were. I've chosen just one to go through. I will put these verses up here. Very familiar with this story. Everyone is, but it's a great miracle. Jesus had just found out that John the Baptist had been beheaded, and he had been teaching and preaching and healing all day, and it's the time that he fed the 5,000. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his people. The Jewish Passover and festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than a half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up, "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were in need. Much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces and 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. Very familiar set of verses here, and we've all been through it many times, but there's some good lessons on this. First of all, only in John's version did Jesus ask Philip where to get food. The other 3 authors recall telling Jesus it was late and to send them away to get their own food, where Jesus in turn told them to get everyone something to eat. So you wonder, why did Jesus ask Philip, come to him, to where to get food, if the scripture says he was only planning, already knew what he was going to do? He wanted the disciples, he wanted Philip to have confidence in who he was and what he could do. Jesus, you can provide. And their reaction was exactly like ours. It was typical. It can't be done. We don't have enough. The sky's falling. Another side question here that I found, just threw in here at the last second. Of these 5,000 people plus women and children, did no one else have any food at all? You think about that. I know they were following him, just wherever he went because of the amazing things that were going on. They left what they were doing. But back then people had something with them. I think they probably did. But what Christ's desire was, again, to tell the disciples, hey, you get something to eat. He wanted them to empty themselves of the exhaustion that he was feeling, that they were feeling, and come to him to provide that food. And then Philip just immediately grabbed this little boy that had some food. Maybe I saw one author that said maybe he was a trader. He was there to sell it already. Take that and here, we can't do. He was trying to make the example, we can't do anything with this little of food. When again, all the time Jesus was saying, look, I want you to trust in me. I've got this. I can make this happen. In his infinite compassion, he had everyone sit down and relax. He said, everything's going to be okay. Let's eat. The creator of all substance, all matter, everything that we know, multiplied a small portion of food with basketfuls left over, while his human form experienced exhaustion and grief as he was grieving over John the Baptist. Yet he looked past all of that and he saw to the needs of others for a reason, to turn the hearts and souls of the multitudes to him. I'd like to say the disciples caught on, but not much later they struggled with the same question. They tried to figure out where to get food when he had already done a miracle right there in front of them. In Matthew 6 we read, look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they are? I don't know about you, but I can think of dozens of times where you're overly concerned with the economy, with the election, with career, with family, all this stuff that permeates your mind from day to day. But each and every time in history, hasn't he always met your needs? Hasn't God always been there for you, met every need that you had? And he was saying just what Jesus said, sit down and relax here, have something to eat, I've got this, I'm in charge. And that's just one of the things we have to try to take our minds to, is that these things that plague us each and every day are not that big. He is in control of everything. So we're actually out of testaments. We've done the Old Testament, New Testament. We've come to the present time. Where are we going to find miracles? Well, I got a book. Got a nice book here. Again, the book, the first half of it, he preps you for the miracles that he's experienced in his life with his friend. The last half of those miracles, I'm just going to share one tiny short one with you. But I want to preface it with this information. I think this is very important. We should be clear that whenever we talk about any miracles, whether today or in the biblical past, we're talking about things that are far out of the ordinary, out of history, and they're therefore attention getting at any time. They're there to get our attention. And that's because it's precisely God's intention to get our attention when He does something miraculous. He doesn't want to manipulate us in some kind of ignorant way into believing something that actually did not happen. And then Mr. Metaxas says this: if He is the God of reality, He wants to do just the opposite. He wants to startle us. We shouldn't believe in anything claiming to be a miracle. We should examine them with the greatest rigor possible. We want to know what is actually miraculous and what is not miraculous. If they are real miracles and are from God, they can stand the examination. What he's trying to tell us is we shouldn't be gullible, and any miracle that is true will stand the test of any scrutiny. Well, it's a quick story here, and again I'll paraphrase the start of it. This is only one page. He had a friend named Eva Meyer, and when she was young, she was with some girlfriends at a sleepover, and they decided to take a little walk together. They came up on this bridge, and the bridge had a blockade in front of it for some work. When the girls got to the bridge, Eva saw that there was a 6-foot-tall stockade fence blocking the road. Evidently, there was road work being done on the bridge, although they couldn't see past the tall fence to see exactly what was being done. But the girls whose house they were staying at told them she'd climbed the fence over and over and just walked across the bridge. She insisted that they had done it many times and explained that they just didn't want any cars driving across it, but it was absolutely fine to walk across it. Eva explains that for some strange reason, they insisted that she go first. They would boost her up and help her get over the fence. To this day, Eva cannot figure out why she agreed to go first, but she did. She says that at that time she was 5'2", maybe 140 pounds, very weak 13-year-old girl who had never done a single pull-up in her life. Maybe this is why she agreed to let them help her over first, or why they suggested it. So the 3 girls boosted her up with their hands and essentially heaved her up and over the 6-foot fence. It was in the next split second that Eva saw the trouble. To put it in her own words, precisely as she typed them to Eric in his when she was interviewing with him, there was no bridge, nothing. It was an unspeakable horror, the sort of thing about which one has recurring nightmares. Eva remembers that in the briefest of moments seeing a huge semi-truck roaring beneath her flailing legs, which were kicking in midair. And she remembers the feel of the rough top of the stockade fence, which she desperately tried to grasp with her body as she went over. Instinctively, she screamed, "Jesus." Then, just as she lost her grip and began to plummet to what she thought would be her death, with the endless speeding trucks and cars, she felt herself lifted up. She saw nothing, but in the blink of an eye felt herself being scooped up in midair and carried back over the fence and placed onto solid ground, but a full 10 feet from where the girls had tossed her over. She says that she remembers landing, my arms outstretched wide, as though a parachute had brought me to a soft landing. And then she remembers the unhinged looks on the faces of the other 3 girls. She remembers that they were utterly horrified, scared witless. Eva says that they were white as sheets, mouths open, eyes wide in terror. All 3 of them shrieked and bolted the scene, running away as fast as they could. And then Eva remembers the moment she felt strangely calm and confused, but she knew without a doubt that Jesus had miraculously saved her life. You know, that unless that ever turns out to just be some vivid imagination, which she's grown up now, and she's Mr. Metaxas' age, in that miracle, God stepped in and saved someone's life. 2 things came to mind for this. He had bigger plans for Eva. He wanted her story to be told throughout different circles. Or maybe he wanted to get the girls' attention for perpetrating such an evil when they were such a young age of 13, to get their attention and get them away from evil early. And this is kind of brings to mind guardian angels. Hebrews 1 says, 14, "Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation?" In Psalms 34:7, "The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear Him. He delivers them." So, you know, we've heard about guardian angels. There's books and books about written over them. I know that's what happened here, and it's just obvious that she was protected. Just a few weeks ago, Paul and I went to see Jack in Joplin. You know, we don't go see Lauren and David anymore. We go see Jack. Same thing with Emmeline and James. We go see Amelia, not them. They're irrelevant anymore. But the night before we went to Joplin, we watched a little documentary on the Joplin tornado and that horrible event that occurred in May of 2011. One of the interesting stories that came out of that was that many of the children that experienced that horrible 17 minutes of tornado had talked about butterfly people that they saw protecting their families, and those people actually survived. Well, that in and of itself is a pretty cool story, but it gets better. There was a mural artist named Dave Lowenstein who had been there before the tornado in December and had proposed a mural in Joplin. He goes all around the country doing these in all different towns, and he proposed this. Well, then he left, and they were planning it, and then the tornado happened in May, and he came back in June not knowing whether or not they were still going to do the mural. Well, as his custom, they said, yes, we still want to do the mural. His custom was to go to the community and ask for drawings from the community. They had over 200 volunteers. The children volunteers all drew pictures of these butterfly people, and they have now become part of this beautiful mural that's in Joplin. So how's that for some verification, if you will, of what these children saw, and that God's power stepping in our envelope from His envelope and doing something miraculous. Hearts, for the purpose of directing our hearts to something bigger than ourselves. One point here before we wrap things up. Why do some get the guardian angel and some not? Well, I've got a answer, not the answer. If I had the answer, this place would be full and there would be a line around the building. I'd be here till way after lunch saying I've got the answer. But I've got a answer. And it comes from the book of Job. There are 3 short verses that explain this to me. Job has had his pain. He's had his friends try to explain things to him, not in such a good way. And then the Lord finally speaks to him and says, "Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me if you understand." And then this verse, "Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify you?" I think that is so very important. God is not saying just shut up and deal with it at all. He's trying to explain to us that we are a created entity. He is our creator. There are things we're not going to understand. He simply wants us to trust in Him. Where He chooses to save, He chooses. Where He chooses not to save, that is something that we can't understand. And when we try to say this should have happened or that should have happened, we're stepping in and playing God, aren't we? We're actually acting for Him and saying He should have done that. And again, would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify you? Let me close with one more quick story, and we'll look at some points to wrap things up. Just last summer, about in August, my first cousin, we grew up like brothers. We did everything together. He started having really bad headaches, and finally his 2 daughters told him, "You need to go see the doctor." And he wouldn't do it. And then one day he was stumbling around his house so bad, they said, "You need to go see the doctor." And so he finally did. The next thing you knew, he's coming out of surgery. And the doctor said, "I got good news and bad news. The good news is if you hadn't gotten in here within 48 hours, you would have been dead. You ought to thank your daughters. The bad news is you've got glioblastoma. You got 6 months to live. You need to go make plans." So it was like, that was a shocker. That was a real shocker. So sometime around November or December, he goes back to the doctor because he's having really bad headaches. They go in for surgery, coming back faster and stronger than ever. Glioblastoma is a really 90-something% within the first year mortality rate. And he goes back in and they do surgery and says it's back faster, it's coming fast, make plans. So then it wasn't 3 or 4 weeks later, he goes back in with even a worse headache. The headache's due to the chemo and the radiation, but there's no sign of cancer. So the doctor says, "Okay, this is a good thing. I'll send you back for a couple of weeks," and comes back in a couple of weeks later. We're all praying as a family. No cancer. Just about a month ago, he went in for a real big long checkup and then sent the results off. There is no sign of glioblastoma in his head. I have to think this is something stepping in from the outside. There's no medical reason for it. His doctor was sitting there with him. The doctor's not a Christian at all. He has little or no bedside manner. And he says, "I didn't think I'd be sitting here talking to you today." And I've never had a patient ever, as an oncologist, see this happen. So I think, I put it right in there with what we're talking about today. I'll close with this. The miracles we discussed today demonstrate God's overwhelming power. They provide for our physical needs, they protect us, and they heal us. All of these performed with the express intent of directing our hearts to our Creator. From the beginning, The wonderful God of creation desires a relationship with us, and whose desire is for us to dwell with Him in eternal paradise. I wanted to add one slide to this too, from a famous local preacher, Larry Branham. Just a few weeks ago in his sermon, he closed with this slide. And as I've said, our creation is a miracle. So is the miracle of the gospel, and the fact that that Creator chose to become one of us, chose to allow us to take His life from Him, that each one of us may, through that process of coming to Him, enjoy eternal paradise with Him. What an absolutely awesome God that we have, who's unlimited power. We get caught up in all of that in the world here, and to minimize it, and He is there at all times. Today, if there's anything we can do for you, if you need reassurance that He's there, if you haven't made the decision to follow Him and the miracle of the gospel, please take the time today to do so while we stand and while we sing.